Okay, so I'm headed up to Roscoe and DeSoto, where Kevin's Burgers used to be. This Carl's Jr. has been here forever. It used to be Kevin's Burgers, and now it is California Sushi. What is it? California Sushi and Teriyaki, I think. So it went from the hot rodders, all the hot rodders show up at the hamburger stand, to you know, sushi. But you know, that was in 1988 or something. I was born in 72. When I was 16, started building cars. Brian Weaver and Shane Weeks and the crew that I didn't know were trying to help remove me from society. Brian Weaver started building cars and Shane Weeks after me with motive to remove me from society with the government psychology community. I didn't know this. So hence, they wanted to take me to Kevin's Burgers. That's pretty coincidental that my name is Kevin and this place was called Kevin's Burgers. So we are at Roscoe and DeSoto. You can see the sushi sign. I'm gonna pull in by Popeyes here from behind, and kind of explain things to you. We used to come here every Friday night. We would work on our cars, and then the hot rod street race crew would come here. And then after this, a lot of them would leave and go to Mason and Nordhoff. And street race, and I'll go there after this. I'm at where Kevin's Burgers used to be. I figure, what the hell, let's just video it for history's sake. It's been a long time. There used to be a bar here, I think. But this isn't Kevin's Burgers. This is the back side of Kevin's Burgers. Where we used to go. Lots of laundries here, I see. Casa Tequila, I have no clue if Casa Tequila was around. Now this is where Kevin's Burgers was. Here, all of this is where the hot rods used to show up in this parking lot here. All of this looks similar. Now Kevin's Burgers is now Sushi Teriyaki. So I'm just gonna get out. Why not? Okay, so this is where, when I was 16 and building cars, all the hot rods would show up here. The Sushi Teriyaki sign said Kevin's Burgers with a hot rodded hamburger. Sushi and Teriyaki, this was all Kevin's Burgers. And obviously with Brian Weaver, to try to create the paranoid schizophrenia. So this is the lot where everyone would show up on Friday nights, and they'd pull up with their hot rods. Everyone would try to hustle everyone. Hey, I don't have nitrous. This is just a stock motor. All that. They would plan their street races. They would go here to Mason and Nordhoff, I think. Nordhoff and Mason, and they would street race by the train tracks, which I believe are gone, for the quarter mile. Locations where people were told to, I only raced a couple of times, but people were told to launch vehicles at me. That is very strange with the amount of people street racing every Friday night. Now, is it because Kevin's an asshole? I don't think so. I didn't know or talk to any of these people, right? And they were completely strangers from all over. So that doesn't really make sense. But anyways, you get the idea. The sign over here, I think I just said it, had the hamburger, right? The hamburger with the zoomies on, And the hamburger with the zoomies on it, like a little drag race hamburger with zoomies and a wheelie bar. And so this is now what Kevin's Burgers is, sushi and teriyaki. California sushi and teriyaki. And while this lot seemed like it was much bigger when I was a young kid at 16, that's usually how it is, because you grow up and everything gets smaller, right? But there you have it, the Kevin's Burger lot. And now we know that Kevin's Burgers was created for the sole reasoning to turn me into, make it look like I'm a violent paranoid schizo to remove me from society, which is very disturbing. But that is the cards I was dealt in a horrific sense, and it doesn't make any sense, but this is where Brian Weaver with the government decided to take me and then publicly shame me for trying to kill me, which doesn't make any sense. So there it is. Kevin's Burgers, now California sushi and teriyaki. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to mention here, I came back, I forgot to mention some things. One of the things I wanted to mention was the sign right here. Had a big hamburger, like I explained, with the wheelie bars and the zoomies. The California sushi, let me fix the exposure here. So this sign with the hamburger and zoomies and the Kevin's Burgers, what is the relevance? What is the relevance of the hamburger? Hamburgers and Kevin. There's a big relevance between hamburgers and Kevin. Well, the relevance is that my brother in high school with his friends would do what they called combustion burgers. And between me working on cars and combustion chambers and explosions and this and that, there's a whole subset of things. Me frying some rings after rebuilding an engine in Hollywood, or Pineapple Joe from Hawaii Racing calling it Black Death so that he could try to get me to say things that made it look like I'm a racist and hate black people. That was one thing. The other thing is my brother and his friends would make these combustion burgers, and the combustion burgers, what he would do is they would grill or barbecue hamburgers and try to pour as much alcohol into the hamburger meat, like wild turkey and bourbon and scotch or whatever they could find in the bar, and get the hamburger to explode on the grill. And his whole story was at one time they accidentally blew up a hamburger by putting in alcohol, too much alcohol in it. So now their endeavors at 16, or he must have been 18, was to try to explode the hamburgers, right? And you know, it was a little fun kid thing, right? Let's try to explode the hamburger. So then, after that, Brian Weaver and my brother, all working together, took me to Kevin's Burgers. Well, that's pretty coincidental that I start building cars. I start building cars, and my friends copy me, and then they want to take me to Kevin's Burgers, same name, and at this point trying to say that I'm trying to passive-aggressively provoke, get reactions, and blow up women, right? Now, where does this come from? Well, this comes from things like Corey Bixby asking me to drive her home, absolutely nothing happening, and everyone told that I somehow did something to her, and her being really angry afterwards and treating me like shit for no reason at all. Now, you're gonna say, well, maybe there was some kind of miscommunication. Well, I can't imagine what this miscommunication could be, so much so that restaurants name themselves Kevin's Burgers, and entire cities come with their hot rods to Kevin's Burgers to try to rid me of the world. Did I blink my eyes wrong? Did I yawn wrong? Did she think I farted in the car? Hints from my father 20 years later that I supposedly pushed on the gas pedal like 1 millimeter too much on the way home, right? My point is, did you really have to do something bad to a girl to piss them off to the point where they want to hunt you down with planets full of people? And I'm talking like rape her sister and disembowel her and hang her from ceilings and things like this, right? Okay, so my point is, like everything else, that all these things that are all these things I'm being accused of worldwide are based on absolutely nothing and based on thin air, and there's nothing even close that I did to anyone. Someone just wants me dead and gone, and they have billions of government dollars to do it, right? And this starts at 5 years old. Okay, so I wanted to explain the connection between the hamburgers, hamburger stands, hamburgers, cars, Combustion Burgers, Kevin thinking women are like hamburgers and trying to blow them up. And then, most importantly, this all seems to stem from a paper I wrote in 10th grade. So this has to do with Mr. Baylor, my 10th grade English teacher and auto shop teacher. And Mr. Baylor didn't like me writing a paper that was synonymous with cars and women and curves, as using cars as analogies for women in my English class. Hence, the relationship between porn stars, using my life, naming their names around my life, and things like that. For example, Chasey Lane most likely was getting personal information for her name. Taylor Wayne, Mason Moore, which you'll see in a second, and tons of other women who are mad at me for having some writing skills in 10th grade, and wanting me dead and gone for this, right? So, for example, after I leave here, we're going to go to Mason Street, where everyone used to street race, and Mason Moore's name, I'm pretty sure, like Chasey Lane, all came from my life, right? Which nobody wants me talking about, and nobody wants to explain how these people worldwide know me, right? They want to chalk it up as he's a violent paranoid schizo who at 29 turned into a violent paranoid schizo for finding out what's going on, and you're imagining it and you're dead for finding out, right? Which is strange. And my mother mad at me for having writing skills, some okay writing skills, and her sabotaging my life, especially in sociology class with a paper and wanting to rewrite a paper for me, setting me up and framing me to look like I'm a plagiarist and things like this. Okay, so now we're going to leave California Sushi and Teriyaki, which at 1988 was Kevin's Burgers, where I was brought with Brian Weaver, Shane Weeks, Tom Hoax, the high school crew, with these paranoid schizo tactics to try to make it look like I'm a violent paranoid schizo who conforms to things and passive-aggressively, in anger and rage, supposedly tries to provoke, spin, get reactions from women to get them to burst out in anger and rage. All fictional writings, most likely with people like Darren Moselle, my brother's friends, to the world to turn the entire planet against me. Me supposedly thinking women are like Combustion Burgers, and things like this, where you're now going to head to Mason and Nordhoff, which is right up the street here where we used to street race. And you will see where Mason Moore got her name. Most likely, I don't have proof of that, but since this is done to me, these paranoid schizo tactics are done to me all day and night, worldwide. It's pretty obvious what's going on, since I meet porn star after porn star, or that are using their names to hint about my life to flip me out, or personal aspects of my life, like Raven Bay, I believe Hunter Scott, who later on changed her name to Bridget Monroe, Bridget B, Nikki Delano, who's working with the police to arrest me on Delano Street. Things like this, you will understand the connection between these worldwide groups to try to make it look like I'm a violent, paranoid schizo to rid me of the world for reasons I can't comprehend starting at 5 years old. But let's head out to Mason Street now. Okay, so I'm now hanging a left on DeSoto and Roscoe. We're gonna go up to Nordhoff and then Mason, which is just up the street here. This is where this is Kevin's Burgers or Sushi Teriyaki now. This is where we would, in 1988, 1988, we would, okay, who knows, it's 12 p.m. or 1 a.m. Everyone would leave after schmoozing everyone over. Hey, my car's stock, race me for $100 or whatever. And they would come up here to Nordhoff and Mason. Now, Nordhoff and Mason has changed a little. At the time, there used to be railroad tracks where it ended. Just past Nordhoff, making it a really good quarter-mile race track, so to speak, except for the part where there's a light at the end and there's no shutdown time, or if you run a light, you're pretty much a dead man. But anyways, you know, this was back in 1988. Half the valley was showing up with building their hot rods or showing off their hot rods or classic cars, which are back then they weren't really classic cars. They sort of were, like you'd have a 1968 Camaro in 1988, but you don't see much of that anymore, right? My point is that today's era can't really understand or comprehend if they're gonna throw judgments about in 1988 things that were going on in 2018. Well, it's a whole different era with a whole different mentality because those 1960 cars no longer exist, right? Okay, so anyways, I believe this used to be Miller's restaurant right here, which they used to harass me for some reason. This is Nordhoff right here, so you can see it's pretty close. I'm hanging right on Nordhoff. And then Mason will be coming up, which goes all the way down to Ventura Boulevard. But it used to stop at some railroad tracks. And everyone would that's where the races would start, at the railroad tracks. So let's go down here. So now remember, in 1988, this was pretty industrial. There was a few warehouses with some trucks. I think maybe even a Gemco, which most people probably don't even know what I'm talking about when I say Gemco. The youth anyways, will have no clue what a Gemco is or was. Let's see. And so this is Mason. This is Mason Ave. Now we have a Colombian cuisine. This right here was very unoccupied, I guess you would say. All these buildings were very warehousey. It looks like we still have the railroad tracks. But the road stopped here. There was no road going through. This road ended. This building right here to my left, 9120, is kind of where everyone stood in the lot watching the races. And the street ended right here by these train tracks. I'm kind of looking for a spot to park here, but I don't see one. So I'm gonna find a spot. So remember, to park. Remember that these train tracks right here, this did not go through. This street ended right here. Okay, I'm at 9120. And interesting enough, the company here now is North Star Moving Corporation. Now, I don't know if this has any correlation to people following me everywhere I lived my entire life saying you better move or we'll kill you, which also relates to movies. But that is an interesting kind of fact I just noticed. But this is 9120, and I'm just kind of pointing out that this is still kind of a trucking industrial area. This is the spot where everyone kind of waited or watched the street races. And we can see our North Star moving trucks. And the relation, I can't tell you if that's related to groups of people saying I'd better move and gonna follow me every place in the world I'm at saying you'd better move. But remember, these operations started 5 years old, so I can't exactly tell you except that there is just a worldwide campaign to exterminate me and eradicate me over things that nobody could care less about normally. Okay, so we are at 9100 Mason Street. This is 9120 where everyone stood in the parking lot just watching the street races. Okay, so I'm here at, I guess, at the time I think we all called it like the end of Mason. Here are the railroad tracks. This was all closed off. For example, there was like bushes and a fence here, right? So what that means is that because there were bushes and a fence, nobody really drove down this street, Mason, because as you can see, even though it's crowded now, back in 1988, this would be our quarter-mile strip. This would be our quarter-mile strip right here, and this is where everyone would wait with the people flagging the cars here to race, pretty much at the end of this piece of concrete over here, right? So this is where the two cars would line up over there. They would flag them to race over there, to the light over there, and these are all industrial buildings, which means that because these were industrial buildings, there wasn't any traffic here, right? Because the street was closed off. Nobody would drive down the street. Now it's an open street, so everyone's driving down it. Okay, so let's set the context of the situation. In 1988, everyone goes to Kevin's Burgers on Friday night. They show off their hot rods. Those that want to race get into their whole hustle deal. Hey, I don't have nitrous and it's all plumbed under the manifold or something like that, right? You know, all that bullshit. Those trying to win by bullshitting everyone else. That was kind of what they did, whatever. I was just some 16-year-old dinking around with this car, rebuilding my 305 with higher compression pistons in my Trans Am, building I think it was a stroked 460 for the Trans Am, which Pineapple Joe then wanted to do a bait and switch with a blown Hemi I was going to detune, which came out of a front engine dragster, which I was going to detune into more of a closer factory Hemi, but with a blower. Things like this that my family was taking out of proportion and making it look like I'm an out-of-control crazy person. Okay, so that being said, hundreds of people every Friday night would show up here to the end of Mason. Those that wanted to race would race, and those that wanted to watch would be here at 9120 in this whatever this was at the time. It was possibly a trucking building at the time, in this industrial area. Now, once in a while, the cops would come by and break it up, and everyone would scatter and then come back the next weekend, and obviously it was kind of the thing, and the cops kind of knew, you know, these are just people showing off their cars and having fun, but we're obligated to break it up. Not the type of things that people are hunted with billions of government dollars for, right? People just being people. And remember, in 1988, this was kind of the thing to do. Bob's Big Boy had the hot rodders showing up and many other hamburger stands. So it's within context of 1960s or actually 1950, maybe even 40s to 1970s or something, right? Or to 1980s. It's all within the context. Now, in 2018, if hot rodders showed up here, I'm sure the context would be different because there's not many classic cars left. Okay, so now let's talk about the street racing. You had street racers from all walks, right? You had the Japanese modified rice burners with nitrous. You had the Opel GTs with 454s. You had the drivable Mustangs with nitrous that you couldn't tell were souped up. And then, once in a while, you had the pro streeters, rolled off trailers, or, never mind, let me rephrase that. You had the pro streeters, which are street legal, which I didn't really see any pro streeters race. And then you actually had some of the non-streetable cars pulled off trailer and racing for money, except those guys went more down to Camarillo and Glen Oaks at like 4 a.m. Where they weren't going to be busted by cops and things like that, right? The hardcore racers that are pulling racetrack cars on the street, right? Okay, so now remember, the police are running around saying weird things, that I'm a crazy man, I've lived in a cave all my life, I'm a conspiracy theorist. All these things to cover up what they've been doing to my entire life. But the point is, the point I'm trying to make here is that the things the police and world are mad at me about aren't anything unusual. Example, all the people that took part in going to Kevin's Burgers and street racing or watching or whatever are not being hunted by the government with billions of dollars like Kevin Perlman, me, is. Why is that? Why out of all these people that avidly raced down here on Mason or went to Kevin's Burgers, why aren't they being hunted? Right? That's the question you need to be asked. My family with the police and government are saying that I'm an out-of-control monster who is a danger to himself or others, but all the people that mostly street raced, they don't care about. Now, did I street race? I'm guessing I street raced about twice. I really didn't have that fast of a car. I had a 1985 Trans Am. I pulled out, modified, rebuilt the engine, modified it. Maybe 350 horsepower, I think. Probably not even that. Nothing compared to the other cars. One race, I raced Brian Weaver in his 454 red and black Chevelle, which is a no contest because a 305 like that without nitrous or anything isn't going to compare to a 454, which I have a whole story behind Brian Weaver intentionally blowing up the engine with nitrous so that he could tell his family lies that the engine went bad. So I raced Brian Weaver, and I accidentally ripped the shifter out of the car, which was kind of funny, and put in a new shifter. Now, the other race is the more interesting one. I can't remember who I raced, but it's not really about who I raced. It's about what they did. Now, I'm leaving the line here. I get up maybe 3/4 miles to, you see the sign up there, the yellow, red, and blue sign, and a person is waiting on the right shoulder. And when I get close, they throw their car perpendicular to the middle of the road, trying to set me up. Now, I'm not going to say I'm Mario Andretti or anything. But I'm not going to say I'm Mario Andretti or anything, but at the time, I managed to sort of throw my car, the rear of my car sideways, and managed to slide around him, and I was pretty damn lucky. But the point is that that person was intentionally waiting for me to launch his vehicle at me to cause an accident. Now, this tactic alone has been done to me my entire life, especially around 16. A lady in the Honda on Ventura and a lady waiting for me on the shoulder on Ventura Boulevard in Topanga by the old Val Surf and Honda dealership threw her car at me perpendicular to the road, and then got out after causing an accident, yelling that I tried to kill her around this time, showing that that wasn't an isolated incident. In high school at 16, in the rain, a motorcycle driver slid his motorcycle in front of me, saying that I had hit him with my car. A couple years ago in Hollywood, a person with a Raven Bay flannel wedged his car in between me and a right turn, causing, a cheap couple $100 bumper tap level accident, trying to set me up to make it look like I'm a reckless driver. A guy at the Peruvian, leaving the Peruvian restaurant on Tampa, I think, like Tampa and I'm not sure, like Tampa and Plummer or Tampa and Roscoe, was waiting for me to leave the Peruvian restaurant, waiting for me on the right shoulder, launched his car in front of mine, and I managed to avoid him, but the GMC rear end couldn't take that kind of maneuver, and then fishtailed into a light pole, which the police are trying to cover up. Right? These are just a couple of these things off the top of my head. Now, I don't know why they're doing it, but what I do know is my brother put a license plate frame on his car that says I swerve and hit people at random. Right? Why did my brother put a license plate frame on his car that says I swerve and hit people at random, and people worldwide are following me around, launching their vehicles in front of my car, is very strange. But remember, my brother threatened my life around 16, saying that he and his friends are going to put me in a mental institution. Another thing you might want to notice here is this guy in the trucking lot pulled up and put on his hazards in a place where you wouldn't put on your hazards, and that is one of the tactics, and recently mass groups have been following around, kind of putting on their hazards when they see me, is to try to provoke and trigger me into a reaction to use against me with the police. Okay, so now I'm getting close as I'm walking to the sign here where the guy launched his vehicle at me, and I managed to avoid, like a lot of others. Most of them I managed to avoid. But now the question you need to ask is, and the sign ironically says new homes. The question you need to ask yourself is, why are the police and government spending billions to rid me of the world for things that nobody cares about? For example, of the hundreds of people that showed up here every Friday night in 1988, 89, whatever, going down to the end of Mason, they don't care about any of them except Kevin Perlman. And Kevin Perlman, wasn't a big race car driver or anything. What about the guys with the 500 horsepower Panteras, the Pro Streeters, the nitrous guys, the blown guys? They don't care about them. They just want Kevin Perlman. Do you think that's a little strange? Now also behind my truck here, there's a guy waiting with their lights on, which is a little strange as well, showing you that I'm sitting here at 47 years old. There are people showing up, or the people that are coming this direction who see me are trying to spook and provoke me in anger. But the real question is, let me give you an analogy. Let's say you go to college. Let's say you go to college and you smoke weed a couple of times, and the government is spending billions of dollars to hunt you down and kill you or rid you of the world because you smoked weed a couple of times in college. But they don't care about the Colombian drug lords or the crack dealers or the cocaine dealers or the amphetamine dealers. They literally have a worldwide, you are an enemy of the state. Why? Why are you an enemy of the state? Because you smoked weed a couple of times in college, right? So, would that be a little strange to you? You smoked weed a couple of times in college, and the government is investing billions of dollars in hunting you and eradicating you or killing you because you street raced a couple of times, which is equivalent to speeding, or you smoked weed a couple of times in college, right? So do you really think that this is about out of control driving and Sean Dinsey running around? We're watching you because of your driving, because at 16 you showed up to Kevin's Burgers at the street races and you raced a couple of times. Do you really think that this is about that and Sean Dinsey's Jew hate lies, looking for any angle or reason to hunt me down and have me killed? It's more looking for any reason to have me killed or rid of the world, right? So the point is that all the things that are being done are based out of we don't want you talking for what you know, right? We don't want you talking for what you know or for the things we did to your life. That is what this is really about, right? Nobody gives a shit about all these street racers that were being people in 1988, cruising around, just having some fun. The police didn't even care at the time. They just kind of broke it up. So, why is it that out of all the people street racing with the real hot rods, the pro streeters, the non-streetable cars being trailered off trailers, why are they exerting absorbent amounts of time, energy, money to have people launch vehicles at me to try to make it look like I'm a reckless driver and things like that? Wouldn't you find that a little strange? Anyways, that's pretty much it as far as Kevin's Burgers, Mason, the adult industry, women like Chasey Lane, who was told to sit next to me in first class on an airplane, claiming that I did something to her when walking off the plane behind her when she was sitting a couple seats across from me. You know, things like that, right? all the porn stars and women involved with Mr. Baylor, my writing teacher, Nikki Delano, Tia Cyrus, Daniel Derrick, you name it. What is it that they're so angry about? Because I can't figure it out. And I haven't done anything different than anyone else, except now you kind of understand how Kevin's Burgers was used to try to make it look like I'm a violent, paranoid schizo, attacking people, trying to make people mentally ill, and things like this. None of which exists. It's all government. It's all government propaganda, fabrications, and fiction, because the government doesn't want me talking about the things that have and still are being done to try to make me mentally ill, to remove me from society. And I can assure you, it's not about my driving skills, which are pretty damn good. It's not about me, 16, going to Kevin's Burgers and street races. These operations start at 5 years old, with my father showing me the movie Wizards and trying to have my brother and people reenact parts out of movie scenes called street theater, to try to flip me into a state of paranoia or mental illness, to remove me from society based on government flagging operations. We're going to label you at 5, flag you, and rid you of the world for reasons unknown, based on government fear. But more importantly, the type of government fear that Adolf Hitler had, exterminating the imperfect or Jews. The same fear that racists had, enslaving black people and not accepting black people. The same kind of fear which has been going on my entire life. Somehow I'm a danger to myself or others, without me ever doing anything wrong, and a family doing whatever they can to stop me from having a normal life and succeeding in life with the government and psychology community out of anger, rage, and jealousy towards me. And that's really what all this is about. It's not really about anything I've done wrong. At this point, finding out at 29 what is and has been going on is about what I know, and them not wanting me to talk while they try to remove me from society since 5 years old. Okay, so just some tidbits I should have added while I was down there and I'm leaving. One of the things I forgot to mention was my father, when I was building my car, my Trans Am and cars at 16, got angry. And so he went out telling the world that I stole $10,000 from him to build these car engines. Well, no, I don't want to say like a car engine. Because he didn't like the fact that I was working on cars. So I worked at his office, filing in his file room till my fingers bled, which he asked me if I wanted to work for him, showing that I'm a really good person, and that I believe in capitalism and making your own money to do the things you want. And when I made enough to buy and work on an engine for my Trans Am, my father got angry with the rest of my family, telling the world that I had stolen $10,000 from him. So if you want to understand kind of the dynamics behind what my family is doing every time I try to do something with my life to try to make it look like I'm a criminal with the police and government to lock me away, you get the idea. By me being a really good person and learning how to build cars, and working my ass off to make money to build cars, my father made up lies with the police, telling the world that I had stolen $10,000 from him. But remember, these lies keep switching and changing. From at 16, my father putting a bullet hole in his 300E Mercedes with the LAPD and saying I tried to kill or scare him. At around 14, my mother's saying I hit Josh Burnham in the head with a golf club. You get the idea that they're just trying to sabotage every aspect of my life to lock me away and rid me of the world. Showing the connection between the people launching cars at me and things like this. I cannot tell you why they're all taking part, which is stranger than hell to me, but I am explaining the situation based on the lies that the world's being told about me by the police and government, and then the government telling them to act as the police and judges and sentencing me and trying to set me up and remove me from society no matter what it takes. So those are all related events. How you can see how my family is hunting me down to have me killed or eradicated with the police and government for reasons I can't comprehend, other than I think he might do this or I think he might do that. Based on fear, but nothing I've ever done wrong. But you can have the same argument like, I think that guy's black and black people are evil, so we need to rid them of the world. Or I think all Jews need to die because Jews blah, blah, blah. Or I think Kevin Perlman, his kind, needs to die because I think this or that. It's all the same argument based on something that Adolf Hitler would do. But remember that this isn't Adolf Hitler. This is the United States government of America with my family and worldwide support since 5 years old. So my point is that these kill operations or eradication operations based on flaggings are done to people in the United States to off them based on I don't trust you, things like that, right?